Some outbreaks of rain over northern England into Wales and the Midlands later on Saturday. To the north of that, turning blustery with some showers. Yes, that is a bit of snow in the hills there. Much of the south still largely dry and mild at this stage on Saturday. But notice further north temperatures struggling to get into double figures.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's only 2 weeks remaining to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2 or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. As the police double down on their treatment of Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, the true scale of the police's Orwellian investigations into non-crime hate incidents is revealed. President-elect Donald Trump has officially won the House and Senate, and with the majority of Republican appointees on the Supreme Court, the Trump train has surely become unstoppable. Some deeply saddening news has emerged. The Guardian has withdrawn from Twitter owing to what it calls toxic content. I bet Elon Musk is crying into his cornflakes. Plus, State of the Nation Book Club returns with Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mail on his new book, The House of War, The Struggle Between Christendom and the Caliphate. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and the journalist and Conservative peer, Paul Goodman. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophie Reaper.
A very good evening to you. The time is just after 8 o'clock and these are your latest headlines. I'd like to start the hour with some breaking news. A 17-year-old girl who died in a collision on the M5 as she was fleeing from a police vehicle has been named by Avon and Somerset Police as Tamsin Hall. The teenager from Wellington, Somerset, was killed in the incident shortly after 11 p.m. on Monday night. Since then, Avon and Somerset Police has made a mandatory referral to the Independent Office for Police Conduct to carry out an investigation. Law enforcement agencies in the UK, Belgium and the Netherlands have arrested a major supplier of small boats and engines to criminal people smugglers. The suspect, a 44-year-old Turkish national, was arrested after arriving at Amsterdam airport. Dutch authorities plan to extradite the man to Belgium to face charges as part of an organised criminal operation. The National Crime Agency says that the suspect has been a top target of investigation for years. Speaking earlier, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the arrest a significant piece of the jigsaw in tackling channel crossings.
It's exactly what we want to see. And it shows that our approach of working with international partners to smash the people smuggling gangs is bearing fruit. I'll continue to work closely with my European counterparts, particularly in Italy, Germany, France, to enhance that collaboration, because clearly it is already having an impact.
2 people have been charged after orange paint powder was thrown at Stonehenge during a Just Stop Oil protest in June. Wiltshire Police said that they've been authorised to charge the 2 activists with destroying or damaging an ancient protected monument and intentionally or recklessly causing a public nuisance. They've been bailed to appear at Salisbury Magistrates Court on December 13th. A TikTok user who was found guilty of posting anti-Semitic content to her thousands of followers has been sentenced today. Fiona Ryan, aged 40, shared previous posts on both TikTok and X, including some which compared Israeli citizens to Nazis and made jokes about the Holocaust. Gavin Sumpter, a senior Crown prosecutor with CPS Wessex, said Fiona Ryan sought to hide behind the right to freedom of speech. However, the court found that her posts and videos were grossly offensive. Ryan was sentenced to a total of 20 weeks imprisonment, suspended for 18 months. And a 62-gun salute has taken place at the Tower of London this lunchtime to honour King Charles' 76th birthday. Today is the monarch's actual birthday, following the official celebration marked by trooping the colour in June. Earlier this morning, the royal family posted a new image of the King on X, and the Prince and Princess of Wales wished the King a happy birthday with this lovely image on Instagram. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Essex is apparently as happy a county as Somerset, a nirvana of peace, a veritable Garden of Eden before the fall. The police have no murderers to catch, thieves to apprehend or muggers to stop. The Chief Constable, Ben Julian Harrington, has so little real crime to deal with in his peaceful county that he claims hate speech is one of the biggest threats to his community. He sent the Rozzers round to harass Alison Pearson instead. Perhaps he ought to arrest himself for wasting police time. It is extraordinary that of all the crimes that are on the rise, knife crime, robbery, theft, drugs, the police are pursuing the rather Orwellian-named phenomenon of non-crime. Indeed, non-crime is the one type of activity the police should not be pursuing. After all, it's not crime. It's the type of activity we ought to recognise is allowed in a free society. But as Alison Pearson revealed on GB News yesterday, the police have been recording non-crime hate incidents like the Billy-O. In Alison's case, sources have indicated that the investigation is now being treated as criminal rather than non-criminal, which is even more alarming. The investigation of non-crime hate incidents is a fundamental threat to free speech, as people fear to say what they think in case the police turn up mob-handed at their front door. the 2016 speech by then Home Secretary, the Home Secretary in charge of the police, Amber Rudd, which proposed making it harder to employ foreign workers, was reported as a non-crime hate incident. Conservative member of the Scottish Parliament, Murdo Fraser, had a non-crime hate incident recorded by the Scottish police for the non-crime of saying choosing to identify as non-binary is as valid as choosing to identify as a cat. Perhaps he should have said as identifying as a bagpipe. Anyway, other cases include a man saying, I was assigned mammal at birth, but my orientation is fish, a woman who claimed her cat was a Methodist, surely all cats are Catholic, anyway, never mind, and someone who wrote a critical restaurant review online. Now, you may think that a non-crime hate incident is innocuous, especially if no charges are brought, though that does remain to be seen in Alison Pearson's case. But in some cases, they may come up on enhanced DBS checks. This could cost someone his livelihood for saying something that it is legal to say. And perhaps even more importantly, this phenomenon will ultimately those who have the least voice, the least powerful in society. If the police have been so indiscriminate as to record them against public figures like Amber Rudd who can answer back, one can only imagine the number of people who have had them who cannot answer back. Free Speech Union has estimated 250,000 have been recorded in England and Wales. But the people with public profiles can fight against these absurdities. People who aren't known to the public are powerless, left with a potentially career-defining blot on their record, all for the crime of not committing a crime. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. I'm joined now by Thomas Harris, Director of Data and Impact at the Free Speech Union. Thomas, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure, Jacob.
What on earth are the police playing at? Surely this Essex policeman has better things to do than to investigate non-crime.
Absolutely. This is a whack-a-mole issue for us at the Free Speech Union. We've been dealing with this, and you've listed a lot of the cases in the public eye, but we've been dealing with it since the famous Harry Miller case, where a police officer came round to check his thinking. And we have helped people sort of every month on this issue, right the way through to last year when we were hoping it was going to get better. Because what happened is that a new code of conduct was brought in to the police where they would sort of dial back some of this NCHI reporting. But we've done a piece of analysis on that, Jacob, and it's proved actually that had pretty much no effect. In fact, we saw some of the police officers increase the number of NCHIs they were reporting.
And the Essex Police's response to this has been to attack free speech further. So they've actually made a complaint to IPSO, the press regulator, to try and criticise the Telegraph for reporting that they behave so badly. This seems to me even worse, that IPSO should not be a means of public bodies silencing a free press.
And we see this kind of use of quangos, regulators, to silence free speech. At the moment, we've got a review of the Bar Standards Board is putting through a review of their code of conduct, looking into whether equity, diversity, inclusion should be pushed by barristers. That's really worrying, where barristers are the bastions of our legal system. So it is really the commanding heights of our institutions, the police forces, the lawyers, who are falling foul to these new ways of dialing down free speech.
And one of the greatest dangers of censorship is not active censorship, but passive censorship. Yes. That is to say, I don't feel I can say something because I'll have the Rozzers turning up at my front door the next day, or a year later in this case, which I think is even more sinister, that you come so late in the process, you don't tell the person what the tweet is. Therefore, how can somebody defend themselves by something that happened ages ago?
And they're not a complainant, they're a victim, even when you're not...
Well, that's completely wrong, because the police are therefore prejudging the event before it has been established that any wrong has been committed.
That's right. We've kind of totally about-faced the sort of process of how these things are sorted out. I was thinking, is this more Kafkaesque or is this more Orwellian? It's almost like a Frankenstein monster version, a horror monster of both Kafka's The Trial and Orwell's 1984.
But it does mean that people will say fewer things because they will be worried that they will face this hassle, this harassment. And the treatment of Alison Pearson seems to me to be pretty appalling, with the police turning up when she was still in her dressing gown.
Self-censorship is back, Jacob. We did another piece of work looking at workplaces and saw that 62% in our survey were self-censoring in the workplace, either saying things they didn't believe or they were not saying things they did believe. So you're absolutely right. And also the people who've been coming to us, especially since the new government came in, when we've grown 50% since the middle of the year, those new people who are coming to us are all saying the same thing. Can I say this? I'm worried that if I say this, I'm going to get caught out by an employer or by the state. And again, that point you made about offence archaeology, going back not just to what you've just said, but maybe a year ago or even 10 years ago. People are really worried now, and that, as you say, that's what we mean by the chilling effect.
And a non-crime hate incident can go on a DBS enhanced check, so people can actually not get a job because of this.
They can not get a job because of this, and of course they may not know that they have that NCHI on their record till they apply for that job. So it's embarrassing all round.
So what is the counter to this? That obviously there are limits on free speech. We know you shouldn't shout fire in a crowded theatre. And we know that stirring up racial hatred is a crime, or incitement to violence is a crime, and having conversations that are criminal conspiracy is also a crime. Where do you think the line should be drawn? Do you think that some of these incidents actually ought to be crimes, and then it would be proper to investigate them?
Well, I think the truth, as in all these situations, is pretty complex. However, what we do know is it's not where it is today, because we've got the worst of both worlds, where it's actually going under the radar, and there's utter confusion about who has these things against their name. So I think transparency, the shining of a light onto this, which is what that code of conduct was going to start to do, is essential.
And perhaps to try and defend the police come under pressure when events happen that they feel have been stirred up, as with the Southport riots, and people say, well, why doesn't the police do more to calm fears? Do the police get themselves squeezed in a vice between free speech advocates and people who are trying to maintain peaceful communities, which is what this policeman in Essex has been saying, the Chief Constable?
There is a tension, but you would hope that you wouldn't have... you'd have more awareness further up the ranks of the police as to what this is really doing.
But the police constable in Essex thinks this is on a par with rape and other serious crimes.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that fair, that actually if you are saying things that fundamentally damage your community, you ought to be stopped, because we need social cohesion in this country?
Well, I think that is a very, very narrow wedge where you say that things you say are equal to or on the same scale as actually going out and doing these things on the street. And that's what we're fighting against, to say, no, we are in a free country. We ought to be able to say these things. As you say, there are always boundaries to free speech. There always have been. But honestly, it's just gone so far. This thin end of the wedge argument has just gone far too far now.
And it gives too much power to the police, and then they waste their time. That actually... crime in this country is a real problem. Fraud, online fraud, is rising like nobody's business. The police aren't capable of dealing with that. So instead they go for the easy online crime, which is you've said something that somebody's complained about, that person is now a victim. You must have done something wrong because you've created a victim.
That's right, and that distinction, but that failing to distinguish between what a victim is and a complainant is again at the heart of this. We also did some analysis on how much training the police forces are getting on free speech versus on all the sort of, again, equity, diversity and inclusion. And that analysis again showed very, very little money being spent during the training process on free speech versus a lot more, many multiples more being spent on equity, diversity, inclusion and all these sort of modern, trendy things.
Well, the advice I would give to my viewers is to exercise free speech, every single one of them, because then the police will be overwhelmed. They can't call round on 60 million people. Anyway, thank you very much, Thomas. After the break, Donald Trump has already achieved what Ronald Reagan could not, and he hasn't even been inaugurated yet. Find out what he's done in just a moment.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, let's speak now to Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers and entrepreneur
Oliver Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Charlie, let's start with you. Has working from home and the culture surrounding working from home killed work experience, do you think?
Undoubtedly. Many companies now are not getting youngsters in for the work experience because of the fact they don't have the staff in. So if they're only in 2 days a week, they're not going to get in the youngsters. They've got no one to train them. So it's killed it totally. And if you think it's bad now, probably 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be absolutely ridiculous. This working from home, I said from day one, is going to kill youngsters' futures, youngsters' careers, and getting people into the workplace. So now the damage is showing through, unfortunately. COVID finished a couple of years ago. The working from home should have stopped and get people back into the workplace.
I mean, Oliver, you have to say it's difficult to see how people in a work-from-home environment can do any sort of on-the-job training at all.
It's really interesting, the work experience piece, actually, because we run an internship program in the summer here. We had 5 people in the office in person and they really thrived, but we did have a couple of people who joined remotely because of their own reasons, right, and where they were. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that as well, because I've got clients who have completely remote teams. Now, I don't. I have an office and our team are based in here, but our clients who do, they're able to offer work experience opportunities digitally with fantastic technology to people across the world, right? So they have people in their team who are working from all sorts of different continents, which is obviously fantastic. But I agree with Charlie, right? You cannot knock in-person engagement. You cannot knock being in the office.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we're talking about the death of free speech and the Essex police force. And Glenda says, how can there be such a thing as a non-crime hate crime? If it's a non-crime, surely it cannot be a crime. Am I going doolally? No, I think you're not, but I think the Chief Constable of Essex may be on the doolally list. Bob says, the country is in a perilous place with the government meddling in policing and justice issues. Non-crime hate incidents are by definition not crimes and therefore not police matters. Catch the real villains and leave free speech alone. It's official. President-elect Donald Trump has obtained majorities in the House, the Senate, and, of course, the majority of appointees in the Supreme Court. For at least the next 2 years until the midterms, he has a stronger position than most recent presidents. Indeed, Ronald Reagan, who was known as one of the most effective American leaders of the 20th century, never had a majority in both houses. So this news means we can expect bold and radical policies from the newly elected 47th president. Well, I'm joined now by my most intellectual panel. You can see the brain cells oozing out. GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and the journalist and Conservative peer Paul Goodman. And Donald Trump, Nigel's going to be able to do almost anything, isn't he, in his first 2 years?
And apparently he already is. I mean, his cabinet looks as if it's been appointed by Dominic Cummings. I mean, it's so full of oddballs and people who are quite clearly unsuited to the job. I mean, the joke going around America at the moment is the Food and Drug Administration will soon be led by Hannibal Lecter. So I actually think that not having any kind of break on what Trump does will be actually serious, not just for America, but for the rest of the world.
But will it be quite like that? Because the Senate, the US Senate, doesn't always vote a party line. Being a US senator is a very grand thing to be, and they have to confirm many hundreds of appointments.
Well, I mean, Trump is reported to have said that he wants to actually get rid of these hearings for appointments.
But that's going to be quite difficult. That requires a constitutional amendment, doesn't it?
I would think that really would be he'd be biting off more than he could chew. But I mean, that's the direction of travel. The trouble with Donald Trump is that not that he will do all the things that he said, but that he's unpredictable. You're never quite sure what comes next.
But isn't this what Milei's been doing in Argentina? And it's what's needed, that there is terrible sclerotic behaviour within modern Western bureaucratic states, and that having a disruptor come in is actually what we need here.
There's a cautionary note, which is, just as in Parliament, because you've got a majority doesn't mean you can do anything you like. So we don't know how many non-MAGA Republicans, so to speak, non-Trump Republicans, there are spread around the Senate and spread around the House. That said, this is a tremendous thing. I mean, Trump's there. Republican majority in the Senate, Republican majority in the House of Representatives. But this does mean he's going to have no one else to blame. This is going to be his experiment. And I think it will have an enormous effect on culture here, because if he really gets going, I think it will change attitudes here to illegal immigration, to what you do about the so-called blob, to attitudes to woke, to how governments run. It'll have a very big impact on the right. And as we're seeing in Parliament from Starmer's caution about Trump, even on the left.
But this is actually really exciting, because Donald Trump is saying illegal immigrants are going to be removed. It would be wonderful to have a government in this country that said illegal immigrants are simply going to be removed and got them onto planes.
But hang on a second, because we don't know where the Trump administration is going. And if he just does, people used to talk about socialism in one country. If he just does capitalism in one country, deregulation in America, but masses of tariffs which hit world trade, and he does a deal over the Ukraine which somehow encourages Putin to be more aggressive, then the Trump presidency could be bad for the right and bad for the world. We just don't know yet.
It's very early days, that is
That's
true.
That's the unpredictability I was talking about, that we don't know what he actually does.
But we know with his foreign policy in his previous term, he was actually very successful. He managed to
he didn't start any wars.
He didn't, which is quite good for an American president. And he managed to develop peace negotiations in the Middle East. He was very successful with the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, I mean, there were things that he did that actually I really did approve of. I don't think it's a bad thing to talk to Putin, as long as you don't cave into him. I didn't think it was a bad thing to talk to Kim Jong-un on the basis that we need to understand what they're thinking in Pyongyang. For all we know, they think they're about to be nuked at any moment by America, and if you can reassure people there that they're not, it might actually mean that their nuclear programme doesn't have to go ahead in the way it's going. So things like that Trump can do which other leaders couldn't. If he carries out his plans for tariffs, we're going to be an awful lot worse off. And I don't believe the idea is, oh, well, because Trump likes Britain, we can escape them.
I think we've got to be certainly cautious about that. But, Paul, I like your idea that nobody but Trump will be responsible. Actually, you and I have both been active politicians. That's what you want. You want responsibility. You don't really want to pass the buck, as long as you've got the power to do things. It's what the point of being in politics is.
You see, in America, they're meant to be these checks and balances, but I do think you want clear leadership and you want to be able to exercise it. The fascinating thing about Trump is, in what you said about his first term is absolutely right. Trump's a bit of a peacenik. He really ought to have flowers in his hair and grow it, because he doesn't like sending people off to war. And when George Bush was president, there were masses of anti-American protests in the UK and big marches. I don't remember that with Trump, because basically he kept out of foreign wars. But when he went in, he'd go in very hard with missiles, as he did against Assad. Obama didn't do, by the way, and as he did against the Iranians.
And that's actually important, because in terms of domestic economy, your country grows most when you're not spending a lot of money on war. This is a long-standing lesson of history, and Trump clearly is aware of that, and his big concern is to boost the American economy and take the state off their backs, from which there is the biggest lesson for British Conservatives.
He is, although my worry is that he decides that the defence industry in America is to be built up through itself, and you stop exporting the arms to Ukraine, and that has knock-on bad consequences for us.
That is certainly a concern. But if he can reduce the size of the US state and boost the US economy, that actually will be good for the world even if there are a few tariffs, the tariffs will end up becoming subsidiary if the US economy is growing rapidly.
No, but I mean, if he does impose the tariffs as he says he's going to do, and if we are going to get, I mean, say even at 10%, you are still looking at the world economy shrinking by 7% on the basis of that, plus the fact in his own country you're going to end up with inflation. He's going to struggle with growth as well.
I agree. Tariffs harm the country that puts them on more than the country that they're put upon.
So if you want an economic revival, which is what he talks about, don't do it.
But if we're so against tariffs, the US putting them on, then the UK and Europe should remove their tariffs, which are enormous, and our non-tariff barriers. But on that happy note, we've got to move on. And thanks to my panel. After the break, the leading ostrich, the governor of the Bank of England, has shown his true Remainer colours, and Elon Musk has yet more cause for celebration. Find out why in a moment.
Evening, time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News, where we keep clear skies tonight. Expect it to turn a little frosty with some fog patches. There will be some rain arriving tomorrow across the northwest, but a fine day across much of the south thanks to this area of high pressure. Changes are on the way as we go into the weekend. But for Friday, that high pressure keeping things largely dry. As I said, through the night where we've got some clear skies across the south, and we could see a touch of frost in rural spots, and we could also see some fog patches forming parts of northeast Scotland, also turning a little chilly. Elsewhere, generally a bit too much cloud, providing some drizzle in parts of western Scotland and the odd spot of drizzle across the south of England this evening, but that generally clearing away. Where we keep the cloud, temperatures could hold up in double figures, but where we've got the clear skies, we could certainly in rural spots across the south see some pockets of frost, and it's likely to be some fog patches around as well, which will linger through the morning rush hour. So just something to be aware of. Further north, not so foggy, but quite grey for Northern Ireland, much of southern Scotland, a bit of rain and drizzle here and there, some of that in western Scotland too. But to the east, generally here, a fine bright start. Any fog patches across eastern Scotland should clear pretty sharply. As we go through the day, we're not going to see huge changes. The fog will take a while to clear, but much of the South Midlands, South Wales, southern England, dry, fine, sunny spells. Generally cloudier further north, a bit of drizzle here and there, and then we'll see some wetter weather coming into the far northwest later. Temperature-wise, double digits, a touch cooler than today in the south, but with more sunshine. Light winds. It should feel quite pleasant. We'll see a spell of wet and windy weather swing south then on Friday night, bringing some outbreaks of rain over northern England into Wales and the Midlands later on Saturday. To the north of that, turning blustery with some showers. Yes, that is a bit of snow in the hills there. Much of the south still largely dry and mild at this stage on Saturday. But notice further north temperatures struggling to get into double figures.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about Donald Trump, the president-elect of the United States, and the mailmogs have steamed in, David says. When Nigel says Trump's government was full of unsuitable people, was he meaning Westminster? And Daz says, if Donald Trump reduces Chinese imports by imposing tariffs and deports millions of illegal entrants, both actions could do more to reduce USA's global warming than he intends. Both save energy. Quite sure that. Anyway, a very interesting point. Now, the ostrich in chief, the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, is set to say later on this evening the United Kingdom needs to forge closer ties with the European Union, supposedly to help stop the country's long-term decline. Speaking at the annual Mansion House dinner, he is set to tell an audience that Brexit has consequences for UK growth, while my most intellectual panel is still with me. Paul, This strikes me as a very odd speech from what I've seen, because Bailey says that we've had a long-term problem with productivity growth, that in the 10 years to 2019, our trend growth has only been at 1.3%, that the US is doing very well, and therefore we should be more like Europe. This just seems to be bonkers, that we had low growth with the EU, we failed with the EU, but we should be locked into a failing organisation.
Well, the governor says that Brexit's had consequences for UK growth. I think it is the case that the Bank of England's had consequences for UK inflation by grossly overdoing monetary policy in the years following the crash. Sensible at the start, but led to lots of problems later. I mean, on America and Europe, I've had a look at what Andrew Bailey said, and there's always a suspicion that, the powers that be are trying to sort of manoeuvre us back into the European Union. But actually, if you think about the UK's position, we are a kind of halfway house between America and Europe. We have to have relations with both. And since we don't know what Trump's going to do, I think it does make sense in some areas to have greater cooperation with Europe. But if Trump really wants to sort of open up America to us, it may be that we want to put more eggs in that basket.
Bailey is utterly useless, isn't he? That at the FCA he was a failure and left under a cloud with terrible failures of regulation. At the Bank of England he presided over extraordinary monetary policy that led to 11% inflation, for which he had independence. He's then been overreacting with high interest rates for too long. Even Mark Carney was not quite as bad a governor of Andrew Bailey, or am I being unkind to him?
I think you're being unkind.
But he did fail in all these things, didn't he?
Well, I don't think he fell with interest rates, no. I think
he was too late to put them up.
But there's an argument that he could have gone earlier, but I mean, I think you had to keep them going.
And he pumped far too much money into the economy during COVID.
But interest rates needed to keep high to control inflation, so I think he got that right. And what he's saying tonight...
But he let the inflation happen, because he was warned by the senior economist, Andy Haldane, the Bank of England, that the bank's policy was inflationary, and Andy Haldane was forced out of the bank.
But inflation was a global problem that actually affected us particularly badly. I accept that. What he's saying tonight seems to me to make total sense, that Europe is still our biggest trading partner. We need to have a reset with Europe so as we can cooperate on things like, we mentioned earlier, immigration. We need to cooperate with Europe on that. So that seems to be sensible. The problem is, when Paul made the point there, that we may have to pick a side. If it turns out we can do a deal with Donald Trump to avoid tariffs, but the EU gets tariffs, the EU's not going to be very pleased about Britain doing a reset with them if we're siding with America.
But we have a trade deal with the EU, which is separate from what the US does. We're an independent party.
It may be, but the cooperation from the EU may well stop if we end up siding with America because we want a special deal on tariffs.
But isn't it just a Ramona argument that the US is about to do something exciting? It's really extraordinary that he's supposedly going to say in his speech that the US has achieved higher growth than anywhere in Europe, and because we're more like Europe, we should stick with low-growth Europe. That's just a weird approach.
Well, not really, on the basis that Europe is still our biggest trading partner, as I've just said. And so on the basis of that, our interests
But the US is our biggest individual trading partner, and we have a big deficit with the European Union.
But when it comes down to the trade, I mean, the American trade is minuscule compared to what we do with Europe.
Well, it's not minuscule. It's bigger than our trade with Germany.
It's something like 20% compared to the 50% that we're...
50% and declining, well, and where we have
hovering around 50% still, despite Brexit,
and where we have a deficit rather than with the US, where we are broadly even.
Yes, but it's much smaller amounts of money, and so fewer goods.
Not much smaller. I mean, it's our most important individual trading relationship.
Yes, if you compare it country by country, but if you compare the United States with the EU,
the US economy actually is growing faster than the European economies, which have plugged themselves into a whole load of low-growth policies. Surely you try and grasp the higher growth.
Part of the whole argument for Brexit was to have flexibility, be an independent country, and up to a point be able to pick and choose. So I think if we have the option, I don't think we have to put all our eggs in one basket. So, for example, on AI regulation, we wouldn't want to go in with the European Union for a moment. If we did that, we're going to sort of stuff one of the great growth areas of the future. On the other hand, we don't know what Trump is going to do about defence. We don't know what he's going to do about NATO. We don't know what he's going to do about Ukraine. So it makes sense to be having conversations with other European countries about recasting our defence policy in the event this all goes wrong.
But the Bank of England should be called the Ramona Bank of England because it's got a second governor who is always weeping into his porridge about our leaving the European Union. Oh, and somebody else is too, because the holier-than-thou British newspaper, The Guardian, His Grace the Guardianship, has taken what it appears to believe a brave, noble and moral move officially to withdraw from the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, citing concerns that the website has become toxic. Bizarrely, the Clifton Suspension Bridge has done the same thing, citing inappropriate content too. Perhaps it is confusing the American usage of suspenders when they mean braces. But back to my most intellectual panel.
And so is North Wales Police, by the way. They've also left.
Well, they don't like free speech in the police, as we were debating earlier on.
They don't think X actually shares their values.
Their values? What are their values? Catching criminals?
Well, I think that the way that X has gone on under Elon Musk, that the values are called into question. So obviously, The Guardian, in a corporate sense, that anyone's entitled to stay or leave X. I still prefer to call it Twitter, by the way.
Yes, so do I. Let's stick to Twitter.
Yeah,
it's a better name.
So I can understand they've done that. The journalists are remaining on Twitter because it's useful. I wonder if...
But Twitter's essential for journalists, and it's essential for getting your stories out.
I wonder if it carries on being so. Had Twitter been what it is now, I doubt that as many journalists and politicians would have joined 15 years ago.
I bet they would, because it was the first mover, and in these technologies it's first mover advantage. And Musk is in favour of freedom of speech. That's why he's such a good thing.
But he's also a purveyor of fake news. I mean,
he's not.
Yes, he is personally.
People put fake news on.
He said that Britain was about to have an inevitable civil war. He retweeted a post which
that was when things were going badly wrong and there were riots all over the country.
We were going to detain rioters in the Falklands. He said that
there were policies to deport thought through rather than going to Rwanda rather than the Falklands.
Paedophiles were being released under the early prison release scheme.
Well, some were, admittedly by mistake. Yeah, but nonetheless, he was right. They were released.
But this was fake news.
And he thinks Keir Starmer's useless. So he tells lots of true things. And he believes, crucially, in freedom of speech. And freedom of speech means saying things that are wrong. And The Guardian doesn't actually like freedom of speech. It's along with the Essex Police, and now we discover the North Wales Police. They want people just to say what they think.
It's entirely... I'm on X, and people are very nice to me. But I think it's quite right to say X is toxic. I have a feeling, rightly or wrongly, for my fellow parliamentarians and MPs on the left, like Diane Abbott, and lots of Tories have been driven off it. But here's the point. All before Elon Musk took it over. It's been an abusive place for years. And if Elon Musk happens to go on X and say that he thinks Britain is on the verge of a sort of civilizational breakdown, OK, I think we ought to be big enough to be able to deal with it.
Yes, and that seems to be fair, that we should be able to cope with what is on Twitter, because it is a variety.
We can't cope with that.
The poor loves at The Guardian are weeping into it.
It is the kind of company we're keeping on Twitter nowadays that didn't used to happen in the past.
But actually, Paul's right. That company's always been there.
No, it hasn't always been there. There's a character called Wayne O'Rourke who got 3 years for his Twitter posts stoking up racial hatred during the riots. He was making £1,400 a month, it was said in court, out of Twitter. That's the kind of company we're keeping now, which we didn't used to.
Some vile people are on Twitter who weren't on it before, but a lot of vile people are on Twitter who've been on it for years. I mean, I find it very, very hard to see any real kind of moral difference. The fact is, people don't like it now. Why? Because Elon Musk is one of the very few big sort of billionaire, zillionaire social media people who's on the right. Well, hey presto, people don't like it.
And the reason he is so much better than the previous owners is that they banned Donald Trump from Twitter whilst they left the Ayatollahs in Iran on Twitter. They hated freedom of speech. They hated Trump. They didn't much like democracy. Well done, Mr. Musk. Anyway, thank you also to my brilliant panel. You saw their brain cells in operation. They are superb. After the break, it's the epic return of State of the Nations Book Club. This is one not to miss with Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mayle. His new book explores the history of the clashing of civilizations between Christianity and Islam. It's a very exciting book.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Online dating apps are still the go-to for millions of British adults, with 1 in 10 using them to look for a romantic connection.
Yes, are you one of them? Let us know. But with many apps introducing subscription fees and complex algorithms, the world of online dating has never been harder to navigate. So who better to join us to discuss this than Mr. Tinder himself, Stéphane Pierre Tomlin. You have been dubbed Britain's best-looking eligible bachelor.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2016. Got an email from Tinder, and it was like, "You're the most swiped man on Tinder."
So just explain to us, for viewers who don't know, what is swiping? What does that mean on Tinder?
Yeah, so on Tinder, the app, if you swipe left, that means you don't like the person in front of you, and if you swipe to the right, that means you like that person.
Do you mind still being associated with that? It's a good thing.
Well, it made me who I am now, and I love sharing how I was successful, and now I'm like a dating expert.
What's your situation now? Are you with anyone? Are you still single? Paying the bill?
So I'm seeing someone at the minute. Things are going well, and I'm a dating expert, so I'm always giving advice to people.
Does she know your title of most swiped?
Of course, who doesn't? It's quite hard. It's quite hard being the most swiped man on Tinder because you get a label on you. So I find it harder than anyone else, to be honest.
And where did you meet her? That's the big question.
At an event.
So not on Tinder?
Not on Tinder, ironically.
So for all that trouble online, it's actually a real life rendezvous. Which
I mean, I have met people on Tinder in the past, and it has worked. Well, it didn't work, but yeah.
I need to know how to do the famous Stéphane Smolder.
That camera is not a camera. That is your best friend, that's your lover. So you really smiles from the camera, so it goes like this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, we were talking about the Bank of England and Twitter, and your views have come in efficiently. And Michael says the governor of the Bank of England has been over-promoted. The growth in the EU has been lower than ours, so why does Bailey think we need to follow them? We need to get closer to the USA for trade and defence. Michael, I entirely agree. And Ray says, why has no one bothered to make the obvious point that tariffs are on products and not services? Our exports to the USA are mostly services. Tariffs will not make us poorer. That's a really interesting point, which we need to look into further. Well, now it's what you've all been waiting for. It's time for State of the Nation's Book Club. Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mail, retired army officer who served in Iraq and Kosovo and former advisor to the Ministry of Defence, has used his expertise of the Middle East to publish 2 books about the region. His first, Soldier in the Sand, explored the modern history of the Middle East from Lawrence of Arabia through to Osman bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. But his new book, The House of War, The Struggle Between Christendom and the Caliphate, explores the history between the occasionally clashing civilizations of Christianity and Islam, providing the background of the complexity we see unfolding in the region today. It's an excellent book. I listened to it on an audio book with Sir Simon reading it, which makes it even more exciting, I think. Sir Simon Mail, welcome. You have written this fantastic book, The House of War, explaining the contention between the Caliphate and Christendom over 1,300 years, with an enormous array of heroes and villains coming through. What sort of prompted you to write this?
An interest really in the Middle East.
and there was a sort of gearing mechanism when I was at university with a tutor called Maurice Keane, who's quite well known to people, between my family's experiences abroad the whole time, an academic enthusiasm for history, and then sort of a professional, by necessity, a professional interest in the Middle East. And I was brought up in Aden. I served the Sultan of Oman for 3 years, First Gulf War, the wars of 9/11, of course, and then ended up as the Defence Senior Advisor Middle East. So although I had written a previous book called Soldier in the Sand, which was really intertwining the family story with the history of the Middle East from the fall of the Ottoman Empire at the end of the First World War. The House of War, I thought, I'll go all the way back and I'll take largely about 10 of the greatest stories, military stories, sieges and battles, where the forces of the Caliphate, and the Caliphate was a sort of fungible thing really, because it moved between Damascus and Baghdad and Cairo and Istanbul and Christendom. That's a rather, again, amorphous thing, but we understand through the papacy.
And it's always much more complicated, isn't it, than Islam versus Christendom, that the French particularly behave badly in the 16th century, that the Valois are doing deals with the Ottoman Turks, whilst Christendom is at risk of the Reformation, and they, obviously, Francis I can't stand Charles V. He's taken prisoner by him, and this is very helpful to the Ottomans.
It's hugely helpful. There's an episode in there in 1543. The French king, I think it's Henry II, says, why didn't you come and winter in Toulon? And they turn the Toulon Cathedral into a mosque. And somebody says, you might just as well have been in Constantinople at the time. And the Ottoman, the Barbary pirates who are conducting this huge mass slavery industry in the Mediterranean are sailing alongside the French fleet. But at the same time, you've got Suleiman the Magnificent, who dominates really the thinking of all the great powers for nearly half the 16th century, writing to the Protestants. So the Valois are conducting their own private war against the Habsburgs. The Venetians, as usual, are doing their own thing. The Ottomans are fighting the Safavids, who are Shia Persians, echoes today. And Suleiman the Magnificent is writing to the Protestant powers in Northern Europe, saying we've got a lot more in common than you have with the Catholics.
And the Crusaders can be quite vicious, not just to the people they're conquering who are infidels, but also to the Christians. So there's the terrible sack of Constantinople in the Fourth Crusade, which is one of the great disasters of Christendom.
It absolutely is. And again, whereas Saladin is fighting to unify the Muslim world, this initial split, long before you get the split between Catholicism and Protestantism, the split between Orthodox Christianity and Catholic Christianity, between Constantinople and Rome, is of absolutely fatal weakness.
And from the fall of Constantinople, essentially the Ottomans are on the rise, but then you get two great events in the 16th century that are very important for Christendom. You get the Siege of Malta and the Battle of Lepanto. La Valletta is such an heroic figure, isn't he? I hadn't realised until I actually cheated and listened to your book as an audio book, where it is beautifully read, if I may say so.
Thank you very much.
La Valletta was at the Siege of Rhodes.
Absolutely.
And so he's defeated the first time round as private secretary.
With Philip Villiers de Lisle Adam, which was always a bit of a bore to keep writing out in the book, frankly. And funnily enough, de Lisle Adams had been on the walls with D'Aubusson, a previous master, at the siege of 1480. So there's, between two of them, they span 1480 to 1565. So they know all about each other. And La Valletta, of course, is taken as a galley slave.
As a galley slave. He's had the most extraordinary career. And he's prepared, he's pretty autocratic, he's brave, he understands his role, and his victory is a very remarkable and important one.
It's a very personal one. And the point I, again, try to make in the book is of course, the gallantry of the Maltese. Malta's, huge connections with the United Kingdom anyway, but during the Second World War and during that, they were absolutely, they underpinned the success of the Knights. All the stories are large about the Knights, but without the sort of 5,000 or so Maltese fighters and the families, etc.
And they get the local Maltese on side, which is crucial
Absolutely crucial. And La Valette, eventually, when the knights say, why don't we all go back into St Angelo, we can barricade ourselves, he says, absolutely, not only are we not going into St Angelo, we're going to break the bridge, so we're here alongside our Maltese allies, and we're going to bring all our sacred relics out from St Angelo, because we either die together or we triumph.
And the sort of end history, I mean, Lepanto is important because it breaks the sea dominance of the Ottomans, and John of Austria is a great figure. But once you've got the siege of Vienna and that fails, it's never glad, confident morning again for the Ottoman Empire.
No, very true. It's a story of decline, and the only time they really get a sort of pride back is when they defeat the Greeks in 1922, which marks the first real reversal of a very, very slow, inexorable decline. It is slow and inexorable. It is slow, but it is inexorable. And of course, the Ottomans become just an imperial power player alongside the French, the British, the Germans, the Russians, the Austro-Hungarians.
And by the 19th century, the other powers keep the Ottoman Empire going because it's convenient to them whilst picking bits off it.
And the tragedy was the Ottoman Empire decided to go in on the side of the Central Powers, Austro-Hungary and Germany in the First World War. They were totally unprepared for it, and we are living with the consequences of that. And if I may say that the first book that is actually a family story, but the story of the Middle East from the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
And you had a claim to re-establish the caliphate in fairly recent history, though not one that lasted. But these issues are still there, but there are still the divisions.
Absolutely. And Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and the jihadists and the fundamentalists always hark back to these resonances, these echoes from history in a way that we don't teach history half as well as we should do. But there, they understand Richard the Lionheart, Reginald de Chatillon. Al-Qaeda sent a bomb addressed to Reginald de Chatillon in 2010. As you say, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr, first caliph after the death of Muhammad, declared himself the new caliph from in the Grand Mosque in Mosul in 2014. And the last words, I think you will recall, are whether the dream of the caliphate died with him in 2019, only history will tell.
Indeed, and we should probably teach history better to our children so they know more about
well, I hope the book, it's what I call applied history, that I hope people will read it, they'll find it interesting, engaging, educative, but will think, I understand better.
Well, look, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to listen to you reading it. This is the book. For people who can get it from all good bookshops.
All good bookshops, I hope.
From Mr. Amazon himself. But thank you very much indeed.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe, very much, Jacob.
Well, it is one of the most interesting books I have listened to or read recently. It's really compelling. Up next is Ben Leo in for Patrick Christie's. Ben, what is on your programme this evening?
Hello, Jacob. Thank you. Yes, the great Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, he does a sterling job, does he not? He has reignited his row with Donald Trump. He's called him a homophobe, a racist, an Islamophobe. We're going to be getting stuck into that. And also, Mayor Forstater, the gender critical campaigner, she's been tonight cleared of any charges relating to a tweet she fired off last year. She was facing up to 2 years in prison. The Met have now dropped it all off the back of the Alison Pearson controversy. I'll be with you in just a few minutes.
Well, that's going to be very interesting. I think Sadiq Khan is not going to become ambassador to Washington. That's coming up after the weather. I'll be back on Monday. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation, and I'm glad to say I'm just going to be motoring down to Somerset, where the weather is glorious. This is about to be confirmed by the Meteorological Office. It'll be sunshine day and night.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News, where we keep clear skies tonight. Expect it to turn a little frosty with some fog patches. There will be some rain arriving tomorrow across the northwest, but a fine day across much of the south thanks to this area of high pressure. Changes are on the way as we go into the weekend. But for Friday, that high pressure keeping things largely dry. As I said, through the night where we've got some clear skies across the south, and we could see a touch of frost in rural spots, and we could also see some fog patches forming part Parts of northeast Scotland also turning a little chilly. Elsewhere, generally a bit too much cloud, providing some drizzle in parts of western Scotland and the odd spot of drizzle across the south of England this evening, but that generally clearing away. Where we keep the cloud, temperatures could hold up in double figures, but where we've got the clear skies, we could certainly in rural spots across the south see some pockets of frost, and it's likely to be some fog patches around as well, which will linger through the morning rush hour. So just something to be aware of. Further north, not so foggy, but quite grey for Northern Ireland, much of southern Scotland, a bit of rain and drizzle here and there, some of that in western Scotland too. But to the east, generally here, a fine bright start. Any fog patches across eastern Scotland should clear pretty sharply. As we go through the day, we're not going to see huge changes. The fog will take a while to clear, but much of the South Midlands, South Wales, southern England, dry, fine, sunny spells. Generally cloudier further north, a bit of drizzle here and there, and then we'll see some wetter weather coming into the far northwest later. Temperature-wise, double digits, a touch cooler than today in the south, but with more sunshine. Light winds. It should feel quite pleasant. We'll see a spell of wet and windy weather swing south then on Friday night, bringing some outbreaks of rain over northern England into Wales and the Midlands later on Saturday. To the north of that, turning blustery with some showers. Yes, that is a bit of snow in the hills there. Much of the south still largely dry and mild at this stage on Saturday. But notice further north temperatures struggling to get into double figures.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's only 2 weeks remaining to win Christmas on us this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents, with a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. You'll get it all in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. This is Patrick Christie's Tonight with me, Ben Leo.
If I wasn't this colour skin, if I wasn't practicing Muslim, he would not come for me. He wasn't coming for me because I'm 5'6", right?
It's come from me because of, let's be frank, my ethnicity and my...
Sadiq Khan reignites his war with Donald Trump by calling him a racist homophobe. But isn't this the real reason the Mayor of London is disliked?
He should actually focus on his job. It'd be a lot better if he did